Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Calliope Music Reviews. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between. My name is Colin, and this is the Canon. Today, I got a special video for y'all. This is a new segment called the Monthly Review, where I'm going to go through a collection of albums that I've been listening to throughout the past month that I just haven't had time to write and record dedicated videos for. January 2025 has been a surprisingly active month. Usually there aren't that many major releases in January, but we've had some pretty notable ones that I want to go over today. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The first album I want to cover today is the Puerto Rican reggaeton megastar Bad Bunny and his 8th full-length release, Debí tirar más fotos. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, or at least as correctly as I can as a Midwestern white boy. But it translates to I should have taken more photos. This record follows a bit of a break where Bad Bunny has taken some time off from major releases to focus on his personal life and deal with the poor socioeconomic situation in his home country, Puerto Rico. As a result of this time off, this new record kind of plays as a distraction from the economic crisis of Puerto Rico, seeing Bad Bunny return to form with extended reggaeton cuts and an increased Caribbean music influence. Because of this time off, this new record is possibly Bad Bunny's most personal and nuanced release, seeing him navigate a broken relationship amidst an influx of Latin dance influences from bomba to salsa and even Jibaro music. Still, the album maintains a mostly electronic sound, but really flourishes in its Caribbean roots. Now, this is still a relatively monochromatic reggaeton record, and it falls flat during the middle stages as hackneyed trap and pop influences start to take over. By the end of the record's hour-long runtime, the Latin preservations that made the sound so interesting kind of get lost in the clutter of a 17-track album. However, it still maintains a pretty danceable energy throughout and addresses some deeper topics that you don't normally get from a Bad Bunny release. So in the end, I think this is a good sonic step for Benito, and the album really plays out as a love letter to Caribbean music and tradition as a whole. So with that, I'm feeling a score of a 5.5 out of 10, with my favorite tracks being Ballet Inaldable and La Mudanza. And again, apologies for these pronunciations, but let's move on to the next record. The next record on the chopping block is independent Korean shoegaze idol Asian Glow and their 7th LP, 111-00011. Now, I was under the impression that AG was retiring the Asian Glow moniker after the release of their 2024 album Unwired Detour, but they're back. And I can't complain because this is another solid, dreamy, and noisy shoegaze release from Asian Glow. Glow actually takes another step into the bright and shiny energies of indie-tronica here while still maintaining that downtrodden emo aesthetic and dense shoegaze sound. While AG's rich manufacturing and slacker mentality are always quite comforting to come back to, they do often get lost in this sort of wishy-washy mix, especially when Glow's vocals still don't command much melody or presence throughout the tracks. Nonetheless, when tempos pick up, the album absolutely shines with its flashy synth leads and bumping percussion. It even reminds me a little bit of the post-metal band Alcest for its rather glossy and uplifting shoegaze sound. And it's an album that flows pretty seamlessly throughout its 41-minute runtime. And for that, I'm thinking a good 6.5 out of 10, with the title track and Camel 8 Strike being the highlights for me on this one. Alright, moving on, we have the longtime Scottish indie rock project, Franz Ferdinand, and their first album in 7 years, The Human Fear. If I'm being honest here, this is a pretty run-of-the-mill Franz Ferdinand record with the usual mix of brash dance punk beats and loud, highly filtered guitar progressions. The record also has a pretty simple message about common human fears, hence the name, and breaking through those fears for a more genuine and worthwhile experience in life. It's a nice message that is communicated fairly well in its quirky and self-referential imagery. The album also flows quite well as its tempo carries the album pretty briskly through its just 35-minute runtime. Then you have that classic post-punk revival slash garage rock combination of crunchy electric guitars and burly percussion that carries a satisfying weight along with Alex Kapranos' complementary muscularness in his vocals and melodies. Now, if that's all I had to say about this record, then it would be a bit better than it actually is. There are just so many repetitive and stringy refrains all over this record. Songs like The Doctor and Hooked are so cheesy and overcooked in their herky-jerky and over-the-top delivery. You know it's bad when you're looking forward to the interludes and the outros rather than the hooks, at least what's supposed to be the hooks, in the body of the tracks. Then you have these rather straightforward, synth-focused dance punk beats that kind of just end up taking away from the power and the edge of the guitar and drums. The record's failures are most notable on the terribly derivative two-step drum beat on the track Build It Up that sits lazily atop this obnoxious chorus, and it ends up covering an otherwise fun energy and pretty hard guitar sound. It's not all bad, especially the more free-roaming jam bits on the later tracks, but as an overall experience, I'm feeling a 3.5 out of 10 on this one. And I think the biggest saviors here are on Night or Day and The Birds. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, the next album I want to talk about is called Goyard Ebn Said, which is the 5th full-length LP from New Jersey rapper and producer Gais Guevara. Once again, apologies for the pronunciation, but anyways, this album continues the use of Gais's alter ego that he introduced on his 2023 mixtape, Goyard Common Exordium. The first half of this record sees Gais return to the form that he introduced on his 2023 mixtape, with forward, braggadocious raps about street talk, rap game success, and of course, tons of niche pop culture references. Unfortunately, the flows on this first half come off as rather shallow and fail to complement the energy of the production. The record also has kind of a questionable mix as a whole, being especially muddy when low-end bass contrasts with tuned-up samples and Gais's high-pitched vocals. This mixing issue, however, is solved on one of the highlights on the album, which is the 10th track called Bystander Effect. This track sees guest rapper and producer Elucid come in with this spine-tingling industrial beat that stands out as one of the more darker and gritty moments on the album. This track also marks a bit of a change in tone for Gais lyrically, where he begins addressing issues of home, street violence, material temptation, and even participating in an industry that is made on racism and exploitation. The second half of the record is really where the album gets its replay value through Gais's calculated lyricism and fittingly spacious and sample-heavy beats. While the first half does provide some of Gais's signature humor, it's the second half that raises it to what I think is a 6 out of 10, with the highlights on this one being Bystander Effect, like I mentioned earlier, and the final track, You Can Skip This Part. Okay, another super interesting hip-hop record that released just on January 27th is Alabama-born rapper and producer Pink Sifu and his 15th studio LP, Black Antique. This record marks an astounding 15 years of consistent album releases for Sifu and sees the rapper continue his grasp on the underground and experimental hip-hop scene. This new record is a 77-minute, 19-track kaleidoscope of rap concepts, with Sifu touching on an incredibly diverse set of genres, from dirty southern hip-hop and trap attacks to industrial psychedelic experiments and even smooth jazz rap constellations. It is a pretty incredible array of varied hip-hop sounds here, as Sifu includes what seems like the entire rap underground, with over 30 guest vocalists, rappers, and producers, while almost always maintaining a pretty compelling vibe. That being said, the album definitely fails the balancing act that is including such a wide variety of features and influences, and as a result, it's messy. It jumps around from concept to concept with no real direction or purpose other than to showcase Sifu's prolific production and networking skills. And the actual raps here are all over the place as well, with some verses from Sifu himself being quite reflective and poetic, but other guest verses coming off as rather dull and repetitive. All in all, though, I do think Black Antique is a worthwhile endeavor for anyone who's interested in eclectic hip hop production, as there's no shortage of flavor and ambition here. However, the sauce is definitely stirred a bit thick here, so I think I'm going to give the album a high 5.5 out of 10, with the most notable moments being on the first track, which is also the title track, as well as the 10th song, Girl Falls Out the Sky. And that brings us to the last album that I want to mention for January, which is the debut split album from Chilean noise rock bands Coclea and Canut de Bon by the name of No Esperen por Nadie, which translates to They Don't Wait for Anyone. Now, I wasn't able to find too much information on these bands or their backgrounds, but they do present a pretty exciting post-rock sound here, definitely wearing their influences on their sleeves, but showing a knack for heavy movements and an impressive technical precision. Coclea starts us off on this one with a series of slow-building noise rock tracks that take the searing guitar play of an Unwound and mix it with the breadth and the intensity of a Slint or even a Fugazi. Then Canut de Bon takes the reins with an incredibly mathy screamo sound, quickly melting their amps with highly technical and violent riffs. Now, the bands can't equal their influences, they don't even come close, but there's a certain raw and savory heaviness to this record that any screamo fan can be highly appreciative of. And obviously, with such a raw recording, you're going to get some unfavorable artifacts and a few unfavorable lo-fi effects here and there, but for the most part, the integrity of the instruments remain intact, and there's no avoiding the intensity of the musicianship here. As far as subject matter, I haven't been able to transcribe lyrics as I don't speak the language, but from the cover and the song titles, it's clear that the two bands have an interest in radical socialism and violent philosophies of the sort. Anyways, overall, it looks as if the Chilean rock scene has found yet another gem in Coclea and Canut de Bon. I'm feeling a low 7 out of 10 for this debut, with my favorite tracks being Zugzwang and De Apollo por Joaquin. And alright, that was a lot of music, but a great start to the year nonetheless. As always, I highly encourage you to form your own opinion and let me know what you think of these records in the comments below. Also, feel free to suggest any other records, albums, or artists that you would like me to review or cover in the future. And with that, this has been Bad Bunny, Asian Glow, Franz Ferdinand, Pink Sifu, Gaius Guevara, Coclea, and Canut de Bon, and yours truly, the Music Canon, and I will see you in the next one.